Minigajebaya. It's not every day in a press conference or even Queen's Park we have a Eagle staff here. So I thank you for bringing it here. I know that today we're talking about a new report that's coming from Chiefs of Ontario and also the police services that are under the Ontario First Nations Policing Agreement, which documents the mental health challenges faced by First Nations police officers in Ontario. And I want to first welcome today's speakers, Meredith Brown, who's the author of this report for Constable for Hiawatha, John Sanation, and also Councillor for Chippewas of Newash, unceded First Nation, Nick Saunders, and Elizabeth George Anton. I know, I think what we're going to be hearing from the report will be difficult to hear. You know, it's fair to say that it's not surprising. They will show us numbers that we already know from listening to stories of First Nation officers here in Ontario. One of the things that's going to happen today as well is during question period, I will give the Premier an opportunity to make it clear, you know, to make a commitment to supporting officers that are under the First Nations Policing Agreement, ensuring that no one has to police their community alone. It's becoming a norm. It's unacceptable. And they do that without the adequate resources. So this should not be a difficult task. You know, we will be asking Ontario government to act now. Again, miigwech and tanak hag kchugumakanak. I say miigwech to the Chiefs of Ontario and the OFNPA for your work. It's great work, and I'm honored and I'm proud to stand with you today to support these call to action. Miigwech.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Meredith Brown, and I am the independent author of this report, this mental health review. The purpose of this review is to understand and to make recommendations with respect to the impact that policing has had on the mental health of approximately 87 First Nations police officers and civilians in the 17 First Nations that have community policing services under the Ontario First Nations Policing Agreement, the OFNPA. I find that the OFNPA, as it pertains to these 17 First Nations, is significantly underfunded and is confusing to administer. And this has led to the following issues that make up my findings. First, the staffing numbers are woefully insufficient, leading to a large number of officers regularly working alone. And when I say alone, I don't just mean alone in a car with other officers on the road somewhere. I mean entirely alone, the only one working in the community. This is an absolute harm to the mental health of officers. Next, OFNPA officers do not have the employment structure of any other police officer in Ontario. They do not have a hierarchy of superiors. They do not have regular oversight or accountability. They do not have job security, a police association, or options for promotion or change. And they do not have the kinds of built-in structures that provide them with checks on or supports for their mental health. This is a high degree of uncertainty for these members, and uncertainty is now understood to be a significant contributor to PTSD in first responders. Finally, and importantly, many of these officers are working in their home communities, which is extremely valuable and important for the communities themselves, but means that every call, Every fatality, every urgent need is someone they know well and often is a member of their family. This means that every call has the real potential to be horrific for officers. That's a reality that is exclusive to policing in First Nations communities. As a result of these structures and realities that are unlike any other policing reality in Ontario, OFNPA members described hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, repeated trauma and re-injury, guilt, reduced help-seeking, fear, helplessness, stigma, isolation, and PTSD at alarmingly high rates. Put into numbers, 92% of OFNPA members that take a leave for psychological reasons remain off work for more than a year. This is a grim, grim statistic. I make 14 recommendations in the review, but the common thread running through all is resources. Without adequate funding for staffing and administration, OFNPA officers will continue to police alone and will continue to suffer the harms that I detail in the report. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Police Constable John Sanation. Currently serve the people of Hiawatha First Nation in the Ontario First Nation Policing Agreement. I've been policing in the province of Ontario for 22 years. And I've served the people of Hiawatha for the past 11 years. In those times, I've been working alone the entire time. In the past 2 years, I've been the only officer responsible for my community due to staffing shortages. I hope that the information in the report brings light to the current situation that we're working under, so that the officers and civilians working in our First Nations communities in the OFNPA can receive the support that they need to continue to provide safe and secure communities throughout Ontario. The information is out there, and I believe that if we follow these recommendations, provide the adequate resources and funding, we can help our officers and our civilians to prosper and continue to provide the service that we do to our communities. Thank you.
Ani Boju, Makos Indigenous Kazmakwa Rodem. Nick Saunders is my English name, and I'm here to stand in support of our officers and with the Chiefs of Ontario and Saul for having us come here today. It's important to recognize that our officers are short-handed and underfunded, and similar to the stories that we've heard already, in some of our communities, we've lost 10% of our community members from opioids, suicide, and other strange things that happen in our communities. And it's important to recognize that our police officers carry this burden on their shoulders at an alarming rate, along with the chiefs and the councillors in our communities. And we want to make sure that we show our support to our officers. Miigwech.
Saguli Swagwe, Councillor Elizabeth George Antonio Getz. I'm from Oneida Nation of the Thames. Ontario's First Nations policing is in crisis. OFNPA officers confront violent calls daily, often involving people they know or people they're related to, while patrolling alone with no immediate backup, resources, or time to heal. The stress begins the moment that the call starts. 75% battle mental health issues. 8% are on leave, and the rest struggle in silence. Countless others burn out, trapped between duty and despair. These officers remain fiercely committed to their communities, yet are treated as pawns in a system built on colonial neglect, forced to make impossible choices without real support. Today, I stand for their mental health, our protectors, relatives, and community members who serve under broken frameworks that isolates, exhausts, and fails our communities. This is systemic racism. Chronic underfunding delays emergencies as overdoses and violence rise. Illicit drugs poison our youth, and our elders are living in fear. This is not acceptable. Ontario claims we want every person to feel safer while being responsive to the unique needs of each community. Let those words mean something. We demand action. End solo policing. We need 24/7 coverage and two-person teams. Fund culturally rooted mental health care that understands our traumas. And deliver equity. Fund First Nations policing as an essential service because they are an essential service. Prioritize safety. Investing in our officers' well-being is investing in community safety. Our next 7 generations depend on it. Donito.
You guys done? Yep.
Miigwech for the remarks. And if there's any questions, we would welcome them.
Hi, Steve Cornwell from the Trillium. Perhaps a question for Meredith or anyone who feels inclined to address this. Thank you for coming, first of all, by the way. But your highlight is 87 police officers across 17 First Nations under the jurisdiction of the Act. Can you give us an idea of what those numbers should be? How many police officers there should be over the 17 First Nations according to the recommendations of this report?
So my report doesn't specifically detail how many need to actually be there. That each First Nation has done or needs to do an assessment of how many police officers would be appropriate given the circumstance. But I can give you some comparative numbers for some context. In municipal and provincial policing services, to have one police officer on duty 24 hours a day requires 5 to 6 police officers on staff is generally the ratio that we're talking about. In these 17 First Nations, the numbers of staff range from 2, and if, for example, one is off for a year, 1 officer entirely on the staff, as is the case in Constable Sination's case, or up to approximately 15, which still doesn't actually get you 2 officers on duty 24 hours a day. So I don't have the full number, but you can do the math based on that calculation.
And just, in terms of from what I can gather, is it would be beneficial to have certainly to not go alone to calls. Can you give me a sense of what having a partner in these situations kind of affords an officer when they're encountering something that's stressful or potentially traumatic? What is the?
So I can give a sense, and then perhaps I think it makes sense for me to turn it over to John to answer in real time. I can say that from my conversations and my observations and my review of this work, having a partner means you from the front end have someone there in a violent call. So you have physical support, you have safety and a backup. If there's something dangerous to happen, you have someone else to support you. But also from a mental health perspective, the reality of answering every call alone, not knowing what may be there and knowing there's no one else behind you is a significant harm to mental health. It creates a sort of a level of hypervigilance and fear that's well documented, not just it's a well documented reality that policing alone creates that kind of hypervigilance and fear and trauma for police officers. So I'm going to turn it over to John to sort of talk about what having a partner would do.
Sorry, the question was what would having.
When it seems like a lot of or some of the discussion here is about the bonus or what's required in terms of having a partner. So for you, what would you feel personally in your work having a partner would do for you?
Well, I completed my training at Ontario Police College in 2004. At that time and every course since, almost always you're the scenario-based training as a second officer. So now you're deployed, you're doing all this work by yourself. So an officer alone has to choose how they're going to handle this if it's a violent or out of control situation. Now you might have to make an arrest without really knowing all the facts yet. You have no one to watch your back while you're making that arrest. Now you have to take evidence. You have to complete an investigation. You have to lay appropriate charges. You have to process this person. This is all things that need to be done as a competent professional police officer. So with the second officer, you split that work. So not only is it safer for you, it's safer for the community, because you can take control of a situation, de-escalate it faster with two officers, one to speak to the witnesses and the other to deal with the involved party the subject that you need to remove from the situation.
Thank you. And maybe, I don't know if Meredith or Saul could speak to this, but the mental health supports for public safety personnel, this sounds like a newer kind of online program providing supports for police officers. Can you confirm or verify whether this First Nations officers are allowed to connect to this? Is this program for them as well? Can you kind of take me through how this new program relates to what we're talking about today?
So that program, which was recently announced, in theory, will apply and extend to all police officers, including these officers. However, there are not at this time culturally appropriate components to that support, and that support is still at this time unknown exactly how it will extend to these officers. So. In theory, it's a help, but it's A, not a complete answer, obviously, and B, not fully responsive to the needs of these particular officers at this time.
And just the last one for me, perhaps for Saul, the support's obviously outlining what sounds like a very dire situation. Why do you think kind of policing in First Nations has kind of come to this point, let's say, in terms of funding and supports?
We have to understand, I come from a First Nation that we first have our police services in the early 90s. Before that, we had nothing. And I think when First Nations policing came on reserve, it was done in a way that to make it look like as if they're doing something without really doing anything. What I mean by that is there seems to be very strategic underfunding. Typically, like over the years, I've been here for 7 years, and I've seen how First Nations are treated by both levels of government. And, it's not broken. It's working exactly the way it's designed to, which is to take away the rights of the people. We're not supposed to stand up as people. We're not supposed to rise as nations. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think mental health for police officers is very important because they're the first line of safety. Anything that happens in our communities. Right now, in my communities, where I come from across the nations in Ontario, there's a drug epidemic that's happening. There's really hardcore drugs that are coming. And that takes a lot of time to be able to try and address those, and whether, the mental health, the addictions, the needless deaths, the unnecessary sufferings. And so we need to be able to have our officers that are currently working to feel safe. And right now, they are not.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess there's some more questions. I guess that concludes our... You want to say something? Okay, come.
So I come from working for a very large municipal GTA service, and I never had to go alone to a call. And when there was a violent call that might have involved weapons or was a significant officer safety issue, I knew that I would have backup there within minutes, and I wouldn't be going alone. I've been working in my First Nation, and I'm from there. I wanted to go home and bring what I learned back to my community. And I've had to go to significant calls with weapons, dangerous situations that put my safety at risk. And it took a long time for backup to get there. We should never be working alone. We should always have backup with us. There should always be two people working together. Like Johnson Nation mentioned, that's what we're taught at the police college. And that's not what's happening. There are some OFNPA communities that are on islands and they're working by themselves, and in order to get backup, you have to take an ice road to get there, or you have to go by boat. This isn't acceptable. So we were told that we needed to complete a policing needs assessment, so my community did that. Then we were told if we did that assessment, then we would be afforded more resources. My community has 4 officers and 1 sergeant. We have 4 platoons, so they're always working by themselves. Sometimes there is no one working when we have an officer who might be on training or on vacation or sick or on a leave. And we did the policing needs assessment, and it said we should have a minimum of 8 officers to a maximum of 12. Every year to 3 years, we're having to redo our contract negotiations, which is very stressful because if Canada or Ontario doesn't sign our contract, then we're out of a job. There's no other police service in this nation that has to deal with that. We're the only ones that have to do that. And in our contract negotiation, we asked for 2 more officers, and we were denied. We were given the contract 4 to 5 weeks before it was due to be signed, and we asked for those officers, and they were saying there was not enough time to review it. So this is what the Auditor General did a report on First Nations policing and said the contract negotiations are not being done properly, and there was a lot of money that went unspent when there is the need in the OFNPA communities. So I hope, and I'm very grateful to the COO and to Meredith Brown for doing this report, because this needs to be understood. When I talk to my municipal policing partners, they don't understand that this is what's happening in First Nations communities. And I think it's very important for people to understand what it is that we're dealing with. We're not deemed an essential service, but we're out there with the exact same authorities and the exact same requirements placed on other police. Miigwech.
Could you say your first name, please?
Sergeant Natasha Maxwell.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Miigwech, that concludes our press conference. Miigwech.